2 weeks. That's all it took for a dog, abandoned and broken, to become her protector. But what she never saw coming was that the dog she saved would save her life in the most unimaginable way. In one shocking moment, everything would change, and their bond would turn into a story of survival, loyalty, and an unbreakable connection. How did one simple act of kindness turn into the most extraordinary twist of fate? She had always been the kind of person who thrived on routine, on having a sense of order in her life. But lately, everything felt out of place, like a puzzle whose pieces no longer fit together. Life had become a cycle of gray days, one blending into the next, each more indistinct than the last. The weight of her thoughts pressed heavily on her chest, suffocating her in a way she could no longer ignore. It wasn't just the loneliness that gnawed at her. It was the absence of hope, the quiet erosion of something once so certain, the belief that tomorrow might bring something better. For months, she had tried to push past the pain, burying it beneath layers of distractions. She went to work each day, her movements robotic. She smiled when necessary, laughed when required, but inside, she felt like she was slipping away, becoming a stranger to herself. At night, when she returned home, the silence of her apartment was deafening. There were no voices, no laughter, no warmth to fill the empty space. The solitude was a constant reminder that something in her life had been lost, and no matter how much she tried to ignore it, it seemed to grow louder with each passing day. Her friends had noticed the change, of course. They would occasionally reach out, ask if she was okay, if she needed anything, but she always answered with the same polite, "I'm fine, just busy." She wasn't ready to admit how broken she truly felt. And besides, she didn't even know where to begin, if she did. It wasn't until one fateful evening, as she sat scrolling through her phone, aimlessly tapping through social media and messages, that her gaze landed on something unexpected. It was an adoption page for a local animal shelter. The photos of the dogs, some with sad eyes, others wagging their tails excitedly, caught her attention. She had always liked dogs, but the thought of bringing one into her life seemed too complicated, too overwhelming. Still, there was something about the images on the page, something about the desperation in their eyes, that felt oddly familiar. As she scrolled, one picture stopped her dead in her tracks. The dog was a middle-aged mutt, scruffy and worn. His fur was tangled and matted in places, his eyes tired, a deep sadness lurking in them. His body seemed stiff, as though he carried burdens far heavier than his size would suggest. A couple of scars were visible along his back, a silent testament to the harshness of his past. He didn't have the vibrant energy that the other dogs seemed to radiate. Instead, he lay quietly in the corner of his kennel, looking out at the world with an air of quiet resignation. For a moment, she simply stared at the screen. There was something about this dog that pulled at her heartstrings in a way she couldn't explain. His sadness mirrored her own. She could see it in his eyes. The same silent cry for connection, the same hesitation to trust, the same weariness that she had felt deep inside for so long. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a flicker of something, a soft, whispering hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could give him a second chance. Maybe he could give her one, too. Without overthinking it, she tapped on the contact form. She didn't even know what to expect, but before she knew it, she had sent an email to the shelter, expressing her interest in adopting him. She felt a strange mix of excitement and fear at the sudden decision. What was she doing? Was she really ready for this? Could she handle the responsibility of another living being when she barely had the energy to care for herself? But those questions didn't stop her. The urge to do something different, to make a change, was stronger than the doubts. She needed to take a leap. After all, maybe it wasn't just the dog who needed saving. Maybe they both did. 2 days later, she found herself at the shelter. Her hands were clammy as she approached the building, her heart racing with uncertainty. She wasn't sure if she was more nervous about meeting the dog or about what this decision meant for her life. What if it was the wrong choice? What if she wasn't ready to take on another responsibility, let alone care for an animal with his own trauma? When she walked into the shelter, the noise of barking dogs and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. She was led down a narrow hallway to a row of kennels, each one home to a dog with a story to tell. Most of the dogs were excited, eager for attention, wagging their tails and jumping at the gates. But when they reached Buddy's kennel, he was lying still in the corner, looking up at her with those same tired eyes. The shelter worker opened the gate, and she stepped inside. The dog didn't move. He simply regarded her with a steady gaze, his body tense but unmoving. She hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Should she try to pet him? Should she speak to him? But the moment stretched on in silence. There was no frantic excitement, no attempt to escape. Just the quiet presence of the dog, his stillness speaking volumes. She knelt down to his level, her heart in her throat. Slowly, she extended her hand toward him, not sure if he would respond or pull away. But to her surprise, he didn't shy away. His nose twitched, and his eyes softened ever so slightly. She could feel the weight of his hesitation, but there was something else there, too. A glimmer of curiosity, as though he was wondering who this person was and what she might mean for his future. She reached out again, this time more confidently. His ears perked up slightly, and for the first time, she saw a subtle shift in his demeanor, a tiny flicker of hope. She smiled, a tear threatening to fall. This was the beginning. She didn't know how, and she didn't know when, but something told her that their lives were about to change forever. She signed the adoption papers later that day, and as she left the shelter, Buddy trotting beside her, she had no idea what to expect. But deep inside, she felt a shift. She was taking a chance, yes, but perhaps, just perhaps, this was the moment both of their lives had been waiting for. The first few days after bringing Buddy home were quieter than she expected. He had settled into his new space, but not in the way she had imagined. The dog was a shadow of his former self, gentle, reserved, almost as if he was afraid to fully exist in the world again. He didn't seek attention or affection, and instead, he often curled up in his corner, watching her with cautious eyes. At first, she was unsure how to approach him. She would sit on the couch, reading a book or scrolling through her phone, casting glances at him now and then. He would lie there, his head resting on his paws, his body stiff. The space between them felt vast, like two souls orbiting each other, yet never quite connecting. She didn't mind. She wasn't in a rush. It had taken her a long time to come to terms with her own feelings of loss and loneliness, and she knew it would take time for him to find his way back to a place of safety. She had seen the scars on his body, the signs of his past, and knew they weren't just physical. The dog had been broken in ways that couldn't be healed overnight. She gave him space, and in return, he gave her a quiet companionship that filled the room in ways she didn't expect. There was a comfort in simply having him there, even if their connection hadn't formed yet. At night, he would settle at the foot of her bed, his presence a reminder that she wasn't alone. Each day, the routine began to take shape. She would take him for walks around the neighborhood, slowly at first, as he tugged nervously on the leash. His eyes would dart to every sound, every passing person, every movement that might signal danger. She noticed his reluctance to engage with the world beyond their front door. He kept his head low, as though waiting for the next blow to come. But over time, the walks became a ritual. She would gently encourage him to walk a little farther, to trust her a little more. With each step, he seemed to let go of some of the tension in his body, but not all of it. There were moments when he would freeze, his body rigid, his eyes searching the surroundings for any sign of threat. She would wait patiently, allowing him the time he needed to feel secure before continuing. They didn't rush. They couldn't. Then, one morning, something shifted. It was an ordinary day, a cool autumn morning with the scent of leaves and fresh air filling the neighborhood. As she opened the door to take Buddy for his walk, he hesitated for only a moment before stepping outside, his ears perked up in a way she hadn't seen before. His eyes seemed clearer, more focused, as though he was beginning to realize that the world outside wasn't a place to fear. They walked together, step by step, down the familiar path. For the first time, Buddy didn't look over his shoulder every few seconds, didn't flinch at every rustling leaf. He walked beside her, a steady presence, his pace in sync with hers. She smiled, her heart swelling with pride. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. He was starting to trust her. The weeks passed in much the same way. Small moments of progress, tiny victories. Buddy began to follow her around the house, his tail wagging in slow, cautious bursts. He would wait by the door when it was time for walks, as if anticipating the journey. She started to notice the way his eyes softened when she looked at him, the way he would nuzzle her hand when she reached out to pet him. It wasn't a rush of affection, but it was a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they were forming. There were setbacks, too. Days when Buddy would retreat into his shell, refusing to eat, or trembling when certain sounds would trigger his old fears. But she didn't push him. She understood that healing wasn't linear, and she was willing to give him the time he needed to process everything. She wasn't in a rush to fix him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and pink, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea. Buddy lay beside her, his head resting on her feet. She looked down at him, a quiet gratitude swelling in her chest. "You've come a long way," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. The dog didn't respond. He never did. But she felt, in the stillness of the moment, that he understood. There was a peace in their shared silence, a quiet harmony that had taken months to find. She no longer felt like she was alone in the world. She had Buddy now, and while their journey was far from over, they were walking it together. As she gently ran her fingers through his matted fur, a soft sound escaped him, a low, contented sigh. She smiled softly, brushing the hair from her face. This moment, this quiet peace, was everything she had hoped for. She didn't know exactly when it happened, but the distance between them had narrowed. The trust was beginning to grow, slowly, but surely. And in that trust, she felt the stirrings of something even more powerful. Love. It was a morning like any other. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting soft beams of light through the window, and the quiet hum of the world waking up was all around. The woman had already begun her routine, making coffee, feeding Buddy, and slipping into the comforting monotony of daily life. There was a sense of peace in the air, a gentle calm that seemed to settle over the house. But, as it often happens, life has a way of shifting in an instant. She had planned to spend the day running errands, picking up groceries, and visiting a friend. Nothing out of the ordinary. She had Buddy by her side, of course, who now accompanied her everywhere, on walks, to the park, even to the car when she left for short trips. His presence had become a comfort, a quiet reminder that no matter what the world threw her way, she wasn't facing it alone. As she walked out to the driveway to get in her car, Buddy was unusually still, his eyes fixed on the street. She paused, looking at him for a moment, sensing his unease. His stance was rigid, his ears alert, and his eyes were locked on something in the distance. She stepped forward, calling his name softly, but he didn't respond. His gaze remained unwavering. A chill ran down her spine. She had learned by now that Buddy's instincts were sharp, his awareness of his surroundings unlike anything she had ever seen in a dog before. He had a way of sensing danger, of reacting to things that she couldn't always perceive. She looked around, but saw nothing unusual, just the quiet suburban street stretching out in front of her. But Buddy's behavior told a different story. Suddenly, a car turned the corner, its tires screeching as it sped toward her. There was no warning, no sign of slowing down. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. It was too late. The car was too close, and there was no time to move. In that split second, something happened, something she couldn't fully comprehend at the time. Before she even realized what was happening, Buddy shot forward. He moved with an incredible speed, an urgency that stunned her. His body acted on instinct, his protective nature taking over in a way she had never seen before. He wasn't just barking or running alongside her. He was pushing her out of the way, throwing himself in front of the speeding car in a desperate, selfless act of bravery. The woman barely had time to process it. She heard the screech of tires, the rush of the car's engine, and then the unmistakable sound of Buddy's bark as he lunged forward, intercepting the car's path. Everything happened in a blur of motion. Her body frozen in shock, the car swerving, and Buddy standing in front of her, a shield between her and the oncoming danger. The car jerked to a halt just inches from Buddy, its brakes screeching as it came to an abrupt stop. The driver's panicked voice reached her, but she didn't hear the words. She could only hear the pounding of her own heart and the ringing in her ears. She rushed toward Buddy, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her legs weak beneath her. "Buddy!" she cried, her voice shaking. "Buddy, are you okay?" For a long moment, the dog didn't move. He lay on the ground, his body still, and her heart nearly stopped. But then, as though on cue, Buddy lifted his head, his eyes locking with hers. He was panting heavily, but there was no sign of injury. He had thrown himself in the path of the car, risking everything to protect her. The woman knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she gently ran her fingers over his fur. "You saved me," she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. She could feel the adrenaline racing through her veins, the sheer disbelief of what had just happened. The driver of the car was still in shock, stepping out of his vehicle and rushing toward them. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I thought I was going to hit you both." But she barely registered his words. Her entire focus was on Buddy, on the dog who had given everything to protect her. In that moment, she realized just how much he had come to mean to her, how much he had changed her life, and how far he had come from the broken animal she had brought into her home. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Buddy's tail gave a small, quiet wag. He was still shaken, still breathing heavily, but he was alive. He had saved her life, and in doing so, had shown her a side of him she hadn't fully understood until that very moment. It wasn't just the bond between them that had grown, it was something deeper. Something that could only be forged through the unspoken understanding of loyalty, love, and sacrifice. As the woman stood there, her hands still resting on Buddy's back, she realized that nothing would ever be the same. The moment of crisis had shifted everything. In one act of heroism, Buddy had not only saved her life, but had also taught her the true meaning of what it meant to be loved unconditionally. The days that followed the accident were a blur of emotions. The shock of what had happened, the fear, the relief, the gratitude swirled in her chest, each feeling more intense than the last. She had spent that evening cradling Buddy in her arms, unable to stop her tears. She couldn't remember the last time she had cried so freely, so openly. But for the first time in ages, it felt like the floodgates had opened, and she let the tears come. They weren't just tears of fear or sadness. They were tears of profound gratitude, of understanding, of a love she had never expected to experience in this way. Buddy, still recovering from the shock, had been unusually quiet for the next few days. He stayed close to her, his presence never far from her side, as though he needed to reassure himself that she was still there. And she, too, stayed close to him, never wanting to leave him for fear that something might happen to him. The neighborhood had been buzzing with the news of the incident. People stopped by to ask if she was okay, to thank Buddy for his heroism, and to offer their gratitude. The dog that had once been a silent figure, misunderstood and ignored by so many, had now become a local hero. And while the attention was overwhelming at times, the woman couldn't help but feel proud of Buddy, proud of how far he had come, of how he had protected her when she needed it the most. As the days turned into weeks, the physical and emotional scars from that day began to fade. But the bond they shared was stronger than ever. Buddy had been her protector, her guardian angel, in the truest sense. In the process of rescuing him, she hadn't just saved a dog. She had found a part of herself that had been lost for so long. One evening, as the sun began to set in a brilliant burst of colors, she sat on the back porch with Buddy resting by her feet. The air was cool and crisp, the kind of evening that always felt perfect for reflection. She looked down at him, the dog who had come into her life when she had needed him most. "You saved my life," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure if he fully understood the weight of her words, but she felt the need to say them aloud anyway. There was no other way to explain it. He hadn't just saved her from physical danger, he had saved her from herself, from the quiet despair that had been creeping into her heart. Buddy's head rested against her leg, and she ran her fingers through his fur, marveling at how much they had been through together. She had given him a second chance, and in return, he had given her a new life, one filled with purpose, hope, and a bond that went deeper than words. In the stillness of that moment, she realized how much they had healed each other. They had both come from places of darkness, from places where trust seemed impossible. And yet, here they were, together, stronger than ever, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and second chances. The woman thought back to the day she had first met Buddy, to the dog lying quietly in the shelter, his eyes full of quiet sadness and uncertainty. She had been lost in her own way, uncertain of her future, and weighed down by her own struggles. She never could have imagined that the dog she had rescued would one day become her hero, her constant companion, and her protector. But now, as she sat with Buddy by her side, she realized that life had a way of surprising you when you least expected it. Sometimes, it took the smallest of gestures, like taking a chance on a dog in need, to change everything. Sometimes, it took a dog saving you to remind you that you were never truly alone. The world outside the porch was quiet, the stars beginning to twinkle in the sky above. The peace between them was perfect. No words were necessary. They had found their place in the world, and that was enough. She wasn't just his rescuer. She was his companion, his friend, his family. And he, in return, was everything she had been searching for. Buddy's eyes met hers, his gaze steady, as though he understood the depth of their connection in a way that words could never convey. There was no need for anything else. In the quiet of the evening, in the warmth of their shared space, they knew that this was where they were meant to be, together, forever. Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.